President Trump had said that he would be on the campaign trail frequently in the 3 months leading up to the midterm elections, and there he was again last night, true to form in Pennsylvania. ABC's White House correspondent Tara Palmieri joins us live now from Bedminster, New Jersey, where the president will be spending the weekend and his vacation. And Tara, as he's on the campaign trail for these candidates, it's what he's saying about other stuff that seems to be making the most news.
That's right, Aaron. It's really interesting. I was there last night with him. He was talking so much about his grievances against the press and how he thinks things have played out in the past year and a half, specifically on his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki and Kim Jong-un in Singapore. And he said about his meeting with Putin, which we still don't have many details about, we talked about everything. He also mocked the press and his critics for his chummy relationship with Vladimir Putin. Listen to this.
They wanted me to go up and have a boxing match. I said, whatever happened to diplomacy? But if I get along with Vladimir Putin, that's a good thing, folks.
You can hear the crowd is clapping. In fact, they're going wild. And in fact, polls show that 70% of Republicans think that he did a great job in Helsinki when he appeared to be siding with the Russian President Vladimir Putin over DNI head Dan Coats, who in fact was in the briefing room yesterday, the same day with FBI Director Chris Wray. And they reiterated the fact that Russia is still a threat to our democracy and that they are still meddling with information wars and planting fake news and other ways of trying to meddle in our elections.
Yeah, and interesting.
Aaron, it was really interesting to hear the two.
Yeah, no, I bet. And what I also found fascinating about that was that the director of national intelligence, who you'd think would be in a position to know, said, more than 2 weeks after his summit in Helsinki, he still doesn't know what the president and Vladimir Putin actually talked about.
Right. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the same thing. All we know, President Trump is kind of talking about it little by little. But just yesterday, he said, we talked about everything. What does everything mean? And should the president of the United States be talking about everything with the Kremlin? So, we're still putting together those pieces. At the end of the day, it was just the two of them and their translators. And it seems like they've ruled out the possibility that the U.S. translator will be called before the Senate and have to testify about what she heard.
And as you touched on, Tara, as the president was talking about his newfound relationship with Vladimir Putin, his aides were back at the White House talking about how they're going to protect the integrity of the midterm elections from Russian attacks.
Right. It was a real dichotomy to hear the president not even mention election meddling at the rally and then have his aides saying, we're working on this. Russia is a threat. And President Trump says everyone is being silly for criticizing me for being so close with Vladimir Putin. It's just so many mixed messages. But I think the law enforcement community felt like they needed to get ahead of this and show that they do take this seriously, even if the president doesn't seem to be.
And Tara, since you were at that rally last night in Pennsylvania, I'm curious about the reaction when the president talked about the prospect of another government shutdown over funding for the border wall. That isn't necessarily music to a Republican candidate's ears, but what'd the crowd think?
Well, it was really interesting because the crowd was still going wild. We're in Pennsylvania. We're very far from the border. A lot of the border states obviously see this as a priority. But some of the people that we spoke to outside from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, that was another thing. People came from all over for this rally. They said that border security was their top priority. And, listen to the president. He's actually saying that he thinks it's better to have a shutdown before the midterms. It's a political gamble. But take a listen to what he's saying.
We're going to start to get very nasty over the wall. We're either getting it or we're closing down government. We need border security. We need border security.
Now, Republican leaders have said to President Trump, let's push this off and other controversial spending measures until after the midterms. And in a private meeting, he agreed to that. But clearly, publicly, he's saying differently. And he actually said that Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, media figures, conservative media figures, have advised him to have a shutdown before the midterms, suggesting that he thinks that this will actually juice the base up before the midterms. And clearly he's leaning towards their advice rather than Republican leaders that he has to deal with every day. He said, quote, it's better before, I think. Aaron?
All right, we'll see. ABC's Tara Palmieri from Bedminster, New Jersey, where the president's going to spend the weekend. And we turn now to Alexandria, Virginia, where the president's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, is on trial for a fourth day now. ABC's Catherine Faulders is covering that trial for us. And Catherine, so far, the testimony has been decidedly dull by Paul Manafort's former bookkeeper, and often it's the bookkeeper who knows all.
Yeah, decidedly dull, but very important, Aaron. Yesterday we were seeing the prosecutor shift away from the tax evasion part of this into the bank fraud side of this. We've heard all about his lavish lifestyle, and now they're really delving into his financial records. You heard from that bookkeeper yesterday. She was Paul Manafort's longtime bookkeeper, with him for 7 years, Aaron, and she alleged that Manafort and his deputy, his longtime deputy, Rick Gates, attempted to inflate income. And now prosecutors allege that Manafort illegally lied to banks to get loans when they were strapped for cash. And I just want to point out, you can see behind me all these people running out of the courtroom. This would be our first update of the day. That's how we get the information. It's no cell phones, no cameras in there. They run out. Trish Turner, our reporter, and our producer, Allie Picorn, run out there with their yellow legal pad and deliver us the news. So they're sprinting back into the hotel to type up those notes now. But back to that bookkeeper. She testified that she didn't know about more than a dozen offshore accounts that Manafort had, and millions of dollars that were classified as income. Now, as you mentioned, yeah, a potentially dull testimony, but perhaps one of the most crucial and important people we've heard from so far. Now, this has the potential to weaken the defense that Manafort is not guilty of tax evasion and bank fraud. And Aaron, I was chatting with our contributor John Cohen just before we came on to chat together, and he says that this testimony from the bookkeeper is in fact critical. He says this is a classic money laundering case, and it shows the fact that Manafort was actively involved in the day-to-day management of his company.
And we're still waiting for perhaps the prosecution's star witness, Rick Gates, to take the stand. He was Manafort's former associate, pleaded guilty, agreed to cooperate with the special counsel. Any word?
So we haven't seen him yet. He hasn't showed up here today, but the prosecutors say they have every intention of calling him. Now, his name did come up a lot yesterday in that testimony of the bookkeeper. She alleged that he had doctored some of the financial statements from the company, $4 million more on some of those statements than she had records of. So you're right, Rick Gates is the prosecution's star witness. It will be perhaps the biggest day in court. He will be able to fill in some of those gaps from that bookkeeper and how exactly this money was hidden, as prosecutors are alleging.
ABC's Catherine Faulders from Alexandria, Virginia, right there at the courthouse where Paul Manafort is on trial for a fourth day. Nearby to Washington's Reagan National Airport, ABC's Kenneth Moten. Now, because there is a new twist in the case of a missing 12-year-old girl. This is a Chinese girl who was here with a tour group. And Kenneth, we are getting the sense that she was in a number of places in the United States before disappearing with a woman there where you are at the airport.
That's right, Aaron, but let me get you to the top headlines here after we heard from investigators this morning here at Reagan National. Yes, Jing Ma, this 12-year-old girl from China, she is still missing. The FBI is involved. We also understand they have her listed and they're considering her as a critical missing juvenile who is in extreme danger. And we've just learned there is a potential third suspect after the girl vanished from this airport, this concourse right here, a baggage claim. This is the last time surveillance cameras here at Reagan National were able to get a view of this girl as she walked out of this airport with a woman who's only described as seen in black, Asian, and middle age. Now, just to recap here, as you look at those incredibly important images on your screen of this 12-year-old Jing Ma, we know that she checked in upstairs with her tour group yesterday morning. She got her ticket apparently, and we understand she had her passport in hand, Aaron. It was at that point she told the tour group that she needed to go to the restroom, but investigators don't believe she ever made it there. They believe that at some point she came in contact with this unknown Asian woman, and that as they walked through this airport, they actually took out a change of clothes and she put an article of clothing over her, the 12-year-old, and then they walked out of one of these doors here at the airport, jumped into a white Infiniti SUV, which you should also have that image on your screen. We understand there was a male behind the wheel of that car. So to give you a rundown, 3 suspects here. The first one, the woman that she came into contact with here at the airport. The second person, a man seen in surveillance video with that woman before they made contact with Jingjing Ma. And the third person, a man who's behind the wheel of that SUV. Investigators, including the FBI, told us this morning they are trying to enhance images to get a better look at the New York license plates that were on that white SUV, that white Infiniti SUV. And Aaron, you just brought it up. You mentioned it that this tour group had made some stops. They were sightseeing here in D.C., but they were also in New York City just a few days ago. They've been here since last week. We understand, according to investigators who told us this morning, that they believe a couple came in contact with the girl at the World Trade Center, but they're not sure at this point if that couple is the same couple that was seen inside this airport. Up in New York, a woman actually gave Jingjing Ma, according to a witness, food after approaching her. So the big question this morning, do these people know each other? I asked investigators point blank, is there a working theory when it comes to how familiar this girl may have been with the woman that approached her? And we're told at this point there are a lot of working theories. One working theory is they do know each other. Another working theory is that Jingjing Ma had no clue who she was encountering here at the World Trade Center or at the airport.
So all possibilities are on the table, but the way it sounds, is this being treated as a traditional abduction, or is there a sense that maybe she was trying to arrange some kind of a defection or a stay for an elongated period in the United States?
Aaron, we asked that question as well. Is it a kidnapping? Is this an abduction in the true sense? And what we learned from investigators is they don't want to get into those semantics. They're just saying that they know that the people that Jingjing Ma left this airport with, she was not supposed to be with them. That is why she is listed as critical missing juvenile who's in extreme danger. They don't know who those adults are. We do know that there's a grandfather in China that investigators have not been able to get in contact with, even though they're working with the State Department and the Chinese embassy to try to get in contact with that one known family member. But at this point also, they're not sure if she actually has family in the U.S. Yes, it seems odd that this girl would walk down this concourse here with a woman who approached her at the airport, gave her article of clothing. She puts on the clothing. Yes, it seems strange. It seems like she is familiar with that person, that adult. But also remember, this is a 12-year-old girl we're talking about who was on a tour of the U.S. with a group from China. And according to the chaperones, according to investigators, she was not supposed to leave with anyone else. And that is why she's listed as being in an extremely dangerous situation here.
ABC's Kenneth Moten with us from Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. We are following the story of another missing person, this one, the Iowa college student. So we turn to Brooklyn, Iowa, the case of Mollie Tibbets being followed by ABC's Alex Perez. Alex, we know that her family has been speaking out once again.
Aaron, this has been excruciating for their family. I want to give you an idea of what Brooklyn is like. Brooklyn, Iowa. This is the epitome of small town America, the kind of place where everyone knows everybody else. Take a look behind me here. That one block there, you see those storefronts? That one block, that is downtown Brooklyn. All of those businesses there, all of those people. If you look at those storefronts, those windows, you're going to see this on those storefronts. They all have signs like this, missing Mollie Tibbets. Everyone in this town has been looking for her. As a matter of fact, we came in through Cedar Rapids. On the drive here, 50 miles away, we saw signs just about everywhere we looked. These missing posters. People who live here are really, really desperate for some answers. It's been more than 2 weeks. She vanished on July 18th. Investigators just a few minutes ago had an update, provided an update on where things stand right now. And the headline really out of what investigators said is that at this point, there is no real big headline. They continue to investigate, continue to follow this case. They say they're investigating, following up on about 200 tips, possibly more that they have received. They say they are not ruling anything out at the moment right now, but they still are asking for the public's help. So they're saying, asking anyone who might have information to give them a call. There's a reward reward that has been established. That reward skyrocketed, they announced yesterday, now $172,000. So they're really hoping that that amount of money will motivate someone who has some crucial information to call in. Aaron?
And so far, the tips may not have been able to pan out, and that's why her brother is urging the public again to come forward with what people might know.
Well, Aaron, her boyfriend, her mother, her father, all of her family members are really speaking out. They're taking to the media, and they want to make sure that people realize that this is someone that they loved and that they want to find as soon as possible, that this has been an excruciating, emotional time for them. Her boyfriend spoke to our Cecilia Vega this morning. His name is Dalton Jack. Let's take a quick listen to what he said earlier today.
Everybody has a Mollie, a person that has changed your life in such a huge way, and that's in everybody's lives. Just imagine if somebody had taken your Mollie. Put yourself in our shoes. You would do anything to get her back, and you would just be desperate for anything to come forward to get her back.
Her mother, her father also making emotional pleas like that one, hoping that someone out there will connect with them and that it will motivate someone who may have seen something to actually contact authorities. Police say they believe that could be the key to cracking this case. Someone who witnessed something when they saw her going for a run that July 18th and maybe saw something that looked out of place or wasn't where it should have been. And maybe that's going to be the key to cracking this case. Investigators say as of now they have about 40 investigators, officials, officers working on this case every day. And for the time being, they're working it 24 hours a day, following up on whatever tips they get. These signs and others, T-shirts and other posters are being handed out just about everywhere you look. So these are going to continue to spread everywhere. Aaron?
Whole town mobilized. That's good news for sure, at least. ABC's Alex Perez from Brooklyn, Iowa, on the case of Mollie Tibbets. When we last left the case of a Houston cardiologist, a prominent doctor who had been gunned down, we learned that it may have been a 20-year grudge that motivated the killing. ABC's Marcus Moore remains in Houston to follow this, and he's with us now live. Marcus, any sign of the person they believe is responsible?
Well, good morning to you, Aaron. Right now, the search does continue. Police continue to canvass this entire city for any sign of Joseph Pappas, and certainly they're working through all of the leads and calls that come in, and that's the work that's happening right now. Meantime, overnight, they were back at Pappas's house here in Houston. This home, the focus of another search overnight after a neighbor reported a possible sighting. Apparently, the lights were on inside the house and there was a back gate that was open, and that resident ended up calling police because they thought perhaps Mr. Pappas may have returned home here, and that sparked a massive response from the police department here in Houston as well as the SWAT team. They ended up searching the home. They did not find Mr. Pappas, and at this point, he still has not been located. But certainly, the fact that police received that call, Aaron, it does speak to the heightened sense of alert that so many in this community have been feeling after Dr. Mark Houseconnect, a prominent doctor, was gunned down as he rode his bike to work on July 20th. Here we are now 2 weeks since that murder, and the suspect has not been caught. And as you've said, the police are investigating this as a possible revenge attack. The suspect's mother, a former patient of Dr. Houseconnect, she apparently died on the operating table 20 years ago.
And when we were last talking to you, Marcus, you had said that James Pappas, the potential suspect here, may have gotten away on a bicycle after gunning down the doctor who was riding a bike. Is that still what police seem to believe?
Yeah, that's right. They've identified him as Joseph Pappas, and apparently, as we've seen in the surveillance video that's been released, he was allegedly on a bicycle, seeming to follow Dr. Houseconnect, and eventually police say passing up the doctor and pulling out a gun and shooting him. And according to police, the suspect in this case is an extensive rider. He was quite fit, and local media, our station here, KTRK, has been reporting that, interestingly, both the victim, Dr. Houseconnect, and the suspect, Mr. Pappas, apparently had their bicycles worked on at the same shop. bicycle shop here in Houston. Certainly a disturbing connection. No indication, Aaron, that that has anything to do with the murder that Mr. Pappas allegedly was involved in, but it certainly is eye-raising as you consider just how incredible this case is.
Yeah, for sure. Intersections large and small over 20 years. ABC's Marcus Moore in Houston continuing to follow that case. In Aurora, Colorado, a Vietnam veteran was shot and killed in his own home by police. There are new questions now, and ABC's Clayton Sandell is on scene for us.
Hey, Aaron, we are outside the police headquarters here in Aurora, Colorado, because this is the first time that the police department is speaking out now on a controversial shooting that happened on Monday. The police chief came out yesterday, did a press conference for the first time to address some of the questions surrounding this shooting. Let me set the scene for you. This was Monday at about 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning that this all started. 911 dispatchers started getting calls from people who knew a man named Dejan Harper. They described him as being on drugs, acting irrationally. They said he was running around damaging cars in the middle of the night. One of the callers tells operators that Harper has broken down the door of a house, has gone inside and grabbed a child. That house belonged to a 73-year-old decorated Vietnam veteran by the name of Gary Black. What happened is, according to Black's family and police, is that Harper went into the house, started attacking Black's grandson, took him into a bathroom. There was a huge struggle with Harper, the boy's father, and Mr. Black. What happened was Gary Black goes and gets a handgun, comes back into the bathroom, and shoots Harper twice, and he is killed. Now, what happens next is what is being investigated, and there are different versions of it, but essentially a few seconds later, Gary Black leaves that bathroom, heads into his living room. Aurora police are arriving at about the same time. Aurora police say that as they arrived, they saw Gary Black still with his handgun and a flashlight in his hands. They say they told him to drop that weapon and that he did not, and they opened fire. Black was killed mistakenly. He was the innocent homeowner in this case. And now the police chief is basically defending his officers. He said they did not act recklessly, that they warned him 5 times to drop his gun, and he did not. One of the things about this case is that the officer who opened fire was also involved in another shooting about a month earlier in which a fleeing suspect was killed. This officer had been returned to the street. There are questions now about whether that officer should have been returned to the force so quickly. The other thing that the chief brought up is that he says that Gary Black had a severe hearing impairment from years in the military, and that it is possible that he did not hear commands from officers to drop his weapon. So that is kind of where we're at now. There is body camera video of this entire shooting that was captured. Right now, the district attorney has asked the police department not to release it until the investigation is complete. So right now, all we have is a description from police about what is on that video, and so nobody has seen it yet. But actually, the Black family came out yesterday and said that they do not want this video released. It's described to me as being very gruesome, very violent, and they do not want Gary Black's life to be remembered and defined by this very gruesome video. They want him to be remembered by how he lived, not by how he died. So there are still very many questions. The family says they are working and cooperating with Aurora police at this point. Everybody wants answers as to how this could have happened, how an innocent homeowner could have been killed. The family says at this point they have far more questions than they do answers. Aaron?
Yeah, sounds like it. ABC's Clayton Sandell from Aurora, Colorado. Want to get you caught up now on the weather. More storms in the offing for the east. ABC's senior meteorologist Rob Marciano.
Hello, Aaron. Great to be with you. What we feared might happen yesterday happened overnight. Big-time flooding across southwestern parts of Virginia, Lynchburg specifically, about a half a foot of rain falling there, swelling the rivers, overtopping one of the dams there. It's still in jeopardy of failing. Cars completely submerged. High water rescues overnight. About 80,000 people live there under the gun for this potentially more flash flooding. Tropical moisture feed in place. This is a very slow-moving system, so more in the way of heavy rounds of rain today, especially up against the Appalachian Mountains, all the way up into New England, where flash flood watches are posted. And this thing will slowly move off to the east tomorrow. Tonight could be some severe weather just to the west of New York City. Another 3 to 4 inches in spots over saturated ground. This is some of the same areas that got hit last week with flooding. So we're looking at the potential for more flooding over the next 36 to 48 hours, then drying out after that. Completely dry out west with a cold front coming through the northwest and the fire zone cooling things off a little bit, but cranking up the winds. So red flag warning still posted there. Temperatures a bit cooler than they were last week, but ramping back up, as you can see, in Redding in the fire zone there, and Southern California as well. Looks like another heat wave for much of California all next week. Aaron, back over to you.
All right, Rob, thank you. ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano. For more on the weather and all of the stories that we've talked about here today, download the ABC News app. Check us out at abcnews.com. I'm Aaron Katersky in New York. Thanks for watching ABC News Live.